Good morning. This is the morning, afternoon, depending on your time zone. This is the weekly VOLTHA TST meeting. Let's see. And the agenda is a little light today, but if anybody would like to add anything in, by all means. So the ongoing announcement, we have the Open Broadband Meetup hosted by Turk Telecom. It's going to be held in October 18th and 19th in Istanbul. We have the preliminary agenda of what's going to be covered. And if I can't talk today, if anybody would like to sign up and go, that's open. Okay, so we have no new items. We have some updates for the VIP jobs that are being cleaned up. Well, this is the ongoing list of BB-SIM test failures. No, not much of a change on that one. There has been a new failure show up in the VOLTHA Open OLT adapter BB-SIM test that I've been poking at recently. We've been experiencing it's been showing symptoms of a timeout when the ONF config loader is running. We launch there's an ONOS process that gets launched, and then we do several queries to try and see if it's alive, and it doesn't, whoops, I got too many windows open, and it does not return before the timeout period happens. Let's see if I've got it here. So there's it's happening in the VOLTHA deploy section, and we have a 10-minute timeout wrapped around this code, and we do set up a few Helm things, we install a few things, and at the end, let me see. Sorry, I'm all over the map today. Come on. What's that? So part of VOLTHA deploy, we install VOLTHA stacks, run kubectl, get pods to start polling to see when it's actually started up. We poll, and then we wait for adapters to be configured. Eventually we get down into this section. This is where we're doing the wait for ONOS config loader. If Mahir's on, this might be related to the problem that you logged. We launch waiting for the ONOS config loader to start. We should see something in the output that's 0/ never shows up, timing, get to the 10-minute point where we're waiting, and then Jenkins ends up terminating the process because we outran the 10-minute time frame. It doesn't look like any of the earlier steps were involved where we're installing the VOLTHA stage the VOLTHA stack pieces or any of the initialization are a problem because those happen relatively, happen quickly. It's definitely waiting for the ONOS process to start up. I did poke around a little bit recently and found out there's a comment around the code where we're starting to launch this, that some of the code the block of code that's timing out, it may only be for 2.8. So I'm going to go in and try and remove that. Sorry, for the VOLTHA 2.8 release. So I'm going to try and remove that and see if that'll get rid of the timeout failure. And I'm obviously going to check and see if there's any downstream failures from not waiting there, but hopefully this will get rid of the timeout failure. But there's notes and status and everything in this ticket. Mahir also has a patch up. Recover after reboot is not working. If you're on.
Yes, I'm on. Actually, this task was opened by Jen, I think. And
I can maybe quickly jump in here. So there is so we have been looking. So Christina and I have been looking a lot on the this one edge core OLT pipeline, this one GPON pipeline, And we got it to the point where now we have 26 of 32 tests passing on this hardware test, and the last 6 issues there are really only 2 different that are failing. One of these is actually this one where Mahir pushed the patch, so the one that Joey was just looking at. This is the second one, I think, that you're looking at right now. Are you? I don't know. So the first one, this recover after reboot not working, yeah, seems to be something related to I don't know, some OpenOLT adapter code. Mahir proposed a patch. I think the pipeline is not happy with it. The testing, I don't know how the process is going there. But at least like Jenkins said, like, no.
Actually, yeah, it seems that there is a bug there. The bug is about when OLT is rebooted. There's a reboot test actually going on, and when OLT is rebooted, it starts to clean the OLT related resources in the cache and database. They are all the flows, jump or sequence, ONU, etc. All the resource related things start to be cleaned up. And during this process, RW core also sends child device loads to the OLT adapter, and this also makes some cleanups. And these parallel cleanups, they cause the failure, a segmentation failure in the OLT adapter. So there is a code in the child device lost, a flag check that is planned to avoid this error, and it checks that if a cleanup is in process, then the child device lost shouldn't be executed in OLT adapter, but this flag only is set in delete OLT case, not in reboot case also. So I set the flag to true so that the child device load wouldn't be executed. So this is the explanation of the bug and its resolution. So coming to the solution, the patch itself. So the patch, the OLT adapter verification job run on the patch passed all the tests actually, but it's failed after all of the tests. I don't know why it's failed, Joy. So if you check the first failure on the patch, then you can see that all the tests are passed. But after all these tests are passed, the script tries to do something else, I don't know what, but then it fails. So I saw that you upstream the patch about this false OLT adapter verification job. So I run recheck on the patch, but it failed again. So in order to merge this, we need this verification job to be run successfully first. This is not the correct one you're looking for, I guess. If you go to the patch, yes, the change logs, yes, you can see the failure here. So the OpenOLT adapter sanity test fails. So we have to fix this first. But this is not about the code, it's about this job itself. Is it the same thing? Config loader thing?
So the failure is the one at the end, right? where it says like Groovy Lang missing property exception, no such property name for class Groovy Lang binding? Or which one do you mean? There's an insane amount of errors in
Yeah,
that
but
output, but I think most of these errors are really just because the pipeline testing code is not in the best shape right now, and I think most of this stuff is ignored. But the last part at the end, at the very bottom of this whole thing, at least the one that I'm looking at right now, the sanity test, looks like this is I don't know exactly what. I would need to go through what exactly Groovy means by that.
Yeah, but if you go back to the patch again and see the first failure, you see there are two failures. No, the first one, the first Jenkins failure in the log, that on the patch, please again. Go to the patch again. Yeah. So in changelog, you see this changelog sections. There are two red verify.
The first one is aborted, right?
The first, no, it's no, just a minute.
It says so. So the first one says aborted by new patch set.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the aborted one, but there are still two failures. So the first one is not about the first one, and the second one are not the same. So if you check the first one and you check the console output, you probably see all the tests are, test. Yes, you see the test sections. Then this error is not same as the second one, I guess.
So the last error is the same, I think. No such property name for class, blah blah blah.
Okay,
yeah, I did. This is unrelated to what you patched there.
Yes, this is not unrelated about the code itself and patch itself. So when at the beginning of this job, you can see that all the tests are passed successfully. But when the scripts, I don't know what is there in script, but when script try to finalize all of the things it need to do rather than the test itself, then it fails. It has this exception there. But I don't know the reason. I mean, we have to solve this problem to make the patch.
I think Mahir, this is a known issue, and I realized the same thing with the Babison test. And Joey knows the problem. Joey, if you remember that robot framework publishes the results, and Jenkins cannot find those files, and the Jenkins fails because it cannot find those result files. Do you remember that? You are muted, by the way. Joey, you are muted.
That would probably help.
Yeah.
Any of the robot log failures, any of that stuff, that's usually the manifestation of an earlier problem. It'll show up in collect artifacts, or it'll show up in robot failure. But like just skimming through the logs quickly, it looks like during wait for adapter, we had problems creating a listener. This is probably the port forwarding stuff again.
Mm-hmm.
And an error was logged that the connections were closed because they were unavailable. This could be a failure condition that prevents other things from running.
So as I said, like the full output here is like covered in errors.
Yes.
But I guess this is the normal state of how these things look. Like even if you look through a working job, you'll see like an insane amount of those errors because the way how these things are written right now, basically with this or true or just ignore, keep going.
Mhm.
part. We need to fix this is port forwarding. This is one of the first patches that I want to like push in once we get rid a lot of the other stuff that we talked before. If this is the reason why it fails, I'm not so sure. It's like very hard to grab for error in this thing because there's like a bunch. It's like 29 matches. So yeah, not sure. So, but like maybe coming back to the original part, the error that is thrown here is not necessarily related to the patch proposed. Sadly, I don't really see how the patch was tested, right? So I think that the part is there's 3 other pipelines which do unit tests, license, and unit test lint.
Mhm.
So I assume that those 3 are succeeding. I don't know if the sanity test is also supposed to succeed or not.
Yeah,
That's really hard to tell. Yeah.
It is supposed to succeed.
Yeah, then we need to fix that first.
Yeah, we need to. So, Joy, we saw this forwarding error last week again in some other jobs, I guess.
Well, a couple of things. One part of where this behavior comes from, I don't know if you remember, a long time ago, we talked about like in some of the make files and some of the tests that are running, there's an or true that's been suffixed on the tail end of a lot of commands. What that basically says, this isn't just the only place, but what that basically says is, I don't care what failed in the middle of this, just keep going. And if we're running into logic like this, I don't think this is going to explain the groovy name problem that's in the stack trace down at the bottom. But with these or true keep going statements in the system, rather than failing right at the point where, the problem was introduced, we have code in place that allows these jobs to continue running. So we may fail early on, be able to succeed in a few places, but at the very end, the accumulated status, the failure, is what ends up causing these jobs to fail. Yeah, we'll need to look into what's causing the earlier problem. Side note with the port forwarding that came up, what was it, last week? Jan had a really good idea. There was one thing I had a question about, though, that I don't remember why this was added. Mahir, you told me before, but I've lost track of it. What was the reason we were launching, externally launching? Sorry, let me get an example up here rather than, where is it?
So I guess maybe like part of the question that Joey and myself asked ourselves while looking at the code is, so in a lot of places, there is this thing where we do kubectl port forward, and then we forward port, let's say 5555 on the host to the service port of
Yes.
of VOLTHA, or of like the controller basically within the deployment.
Yeah,
Then we are trying to, and so this is not only done once, but this is actually wrapped in a while true condition. So it will just like continue running forever. And then there's also some stuff around it for putting it in the background. And partially these things, like these conditions around it and whatnot, are then causing exactly the failures that we were looking at, because they're trying to forward stuff and trying that. I don't know how often a while true condition is called, but probably pretty often. And then these things. So the question that we asked was, why would we do kubectl port forward instead of creating a service with a node port to do the same thing?
Remember here?
I actually don't know the answer of this question. I mean, I'm not that expert of Kubernetes. If we can do the same thing with it, we can do. There are three forwardings done during this processes, this testing processes. One is to use VOLTHA CLI, the other to use ONO CLI, and the third one, I think, to reach to the etcd databases, because during tests there are some verifications that you have to do using VOLTHA CLI, ONO CLI, and querying etcd. That's forwardings are done because of this, but probably during this test there are a lot of this kind of queries and verifications from both CLIs and etcd. So different kinds of tests trying to do this forwarding if it's not in the place. But if it's in the place, then the test probably skips, takes the error and don't care to the error, because the forwarding done before in another test, it just gets the error in forwarding, and because of this, or I guess it skips this step and go to to query the CLI or database directly. So there are.
So I guess our question here is really I think we discovered why it is there. So you obviously, if you want to use VoLTHTL to talk to VOLTHA, then you need like a port forwarding. So you need to be accessible outside of the cluster. But kubectl port forward is really only for debugging purposes, right? So it's the only intention of this command is like to like launch a local kubectl process that should forward something locally for debugging, and then it should die. So this thing is never intended to like have a stable interface for long term. And I guess this is probably the reason why there's also while true conditions to keep this living somehow. So the correct way, I think, of what you're trying to do here would be to use a service with a node port. So to really like just add a service to the Kubernetes, to the corresponding Kubernetes namespace, and not use the service type cluster IP, which is the default, but instead use the service type node port, which will then expose a specific port on each of the hosts. So that port has to be unique across the whole cluster. And then you can access that node port on the local, so basically on the host itself, which would be the same thing as here. We cannot use the same port because node ports are only allowed in a certain port range to not interfere with other host services. But it would do the same thing, but it would do it inside of Kubernetes. And it would also go away if you like delete the service, and you don't have to use extensive methods of p-grapping, p-killing, grapping, killing something around it to get rid of it again. And I would like to push a patch into that direction, unless there was a reason why this was done, because this looks oddly complicated.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. So the reason we didn't open the node ports in the VOLTHA Helm chart was because of the security reasons, and we don't want to publish those charts with node ports because there might be some operators using that. I don't think it is the case, but there was reasoning at that time. I think we can open the node port services in the Helm charts, directly in the VOLTHA Helm chart. That's one way we should do that. Or the other option might be we can patch the Helm charts so that while installing via the Helm charts, you can access the ports of the services. I think the second option is better.
But we don't need to patch the Helm chart. It's like we can just replace the command here with the command that creates a service, right? So
yeah, my second option was that. Yes, correct.
Okay, so like just to like, so this is basically more or less doing the same thing of what so the command in the chat, if anybody cares, is basically doing the same thing, but just using kubectl here to create this this service which exposes the deployment. The port would obviously be not 55555, but it would be like 30,005. But that's just configuration on the VoLTHTL side. So that's also something, since we're writing the VoLTHTL config either way, you can just do that. And we're really just wondering if we can just replace all the kubectl port forward commands here with something like I posted in the chat. And then once we want to clean up, we just delete the service again. Instead of trying to find a process that includes port forward and killing it.
I think it's perfectly makes sense
Okay.
and the right
Okay.
thing.
Then let's do that. I'll push the patch and then
The
should I add
only-
you as a reviewer there, or
Sorry?
should I add you as a reviewer there?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Cool. I'll do that.
The only problem might be not sure about the etcd service, because some of the robot tests will try to access the etcd. I believe we can apply the same for the etcd service. I hope so. But the others is not gonna be a problem.
Okay. So yeah, so hopefully if we have that, that should get rid of most of the errors that we saw in this test log for the port forwarding part. And then we would still need to see what is left, like in regards of these this groovy name error, whatever thing. I don't know what that means. I have to like, yeah, it probably means something is not defined, or I don't know.
It's fun.
Okay, good.
because it's fun because the stack trace doesn't even match up to a source file. It's just Jenkins file.
Yeah, it's like we have to see where this comes from, but we can get rid of most of the other stuff. I'll propose the patch. I'll add you as a reviewer, and we can see how we can push this forward.
Yeah. Hey guys, it's Marcos.
Yep.
Just to a note in this, instead of using the port forward, do you think that we could rob these ports using an ingress controller or via Metal B load balance in the future?
That would be even better. So I thought about that first, to like go in the direction of an ingress controller. The thing is, there's a lot more patches needed for that, right? So the ingress controller, I guess, would be ideally placed within the Helm chart of what we're deploying there. We would need to check a bit how which ingress controller and all the others. So it's a larger patch set. That's the short answer. So I totally agree. This is the much better solution to have an ingress controller, and I don't like this exposing of deployments. But at least exposing of deployments here gets rid of a lot of the weird killing of processes, because it now moves the logic into Kubernetes. And then the next step would probably be in the next VOLTHA Helm chart release process to see if we can get an ingress controller or something in there, because that would absolutely make sense. But it's more patches. It's a bigger file and everything, and you need to configure it and choose one, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
But I agree.
Yeah. It's a long term, yeah.
Oops. Okay. Does anybody have anything else you'd like to add, or more ideas? Okay, so it looks like we have another.
Actually, so
Oh, go ahead.
if I could just make a comment, this is Timon. So if I observe correctly, all these test cases are based on ONOS, but at the same time, we're trying to move the project towards the Go controller. So I don't know if there is any reason to consider trying to integrate the Go controller into some of this test logic earlier versus putting effort into getting all the ONOS test cases working. Any comment?
Simon, first of all, I mean, yes, of course, most of the errors, I don't think they're about the ONOS itself. actually.
Mhm.
And the secondly, I think it's not too easy to, you know, replace ONOS with another controller easily, you know, in a few weeks or in a few days. So we're in release process, and I don't think that we can replace it easily. And I'm not sure if it is ready, actually, you know, the alternative implementation of ONOS is not ready yet, I guess.
Mhm. Okay, good. Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that, well, I just wanted to hear what you thought about that. Thanks.
Okay, so
Jan, perhaps we can add this comment here, Joy and Jan. I mean, the solution that we're trying to find, it shouldn't insert anything that we don't want to use in, you know, fields, in deployments. That's specific to the test. You know, if we try to fix some tests here and put something into Helm charts or other parts of the codes that create something that we don't want to use in the deployment in the field, then we shouldn't put it into the code itself. You know, it can be a thing that we use only in tests. It shouldn't affect the real Helm charts or real configuration, etc.
But given that comment, so like, what would be the normal way how in a real deployment people would use VOLTHA to talk to VOLTHA, if not using an ingress controller? How would people do that?
In our deployment scenario, we use VOLTHA as a Kubernetes pod. We deploy VOLTHA inside a pod, so we don't use
So
it.
there's
Yeah.
no way to actually talk to the cluster from the outside in a real world deployment.
Yes.
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 Okay, then
Yes.
the other option here would obviously be, instead of running kubectl to expose the port to the nodes, we can do the same thing. We can, in our test, launch a pod. Did you specifically launch a pod, or do you use one of the VOLTHA pods or one of the VOLTHA containers already running to call VOLTCTL?
Yeah, we did the same suggestions, I think, years ago, but I don't remember the reason why they don't want to use it that way. So definitely it could be an option, my personal opinion.
Okay, because I mean, like, that if there is there already a pod running which contains VOLTCTL?
No, not in the community, but it could be done easily with a new
Okay,
Helm
because
chart.
I mean, if the community version should be like usable by default for people that deploy it in the outside world, I think it might be cool if they could use VOLTCTL to talk to it, right? And by default. So I think it might be a cool thing to have a default way coming from the Helm deployment, basically a suggestion to tell people, if you want to talk to your cluster, either use this way to launch a VOLTCTL pod, or do install this ingress controller or whatever else. And then in the pipelines, we would obviously try to mimic this behavior, because otherwise, like, people out in the world would still have no way of actually talking to their VOLTHA cluster unless they figured out a way by themselves. And we would have found a way in our testing, but not tell people, because this is not the right place to document how people in production should use stuff, right? So maybe we can, like,
Yes, I agree with you. And also, people raising lots of questions. Generally, they are somehow misconfiguring the service or they are misconfiguring the port forwarding, and they cannot access the VOLTA API through the VOLT CTL. So it might be easier for the community also. But for this release, I believe there will be other things we need to do, like we need to update the documentation, and also we probably need to change the releasing of VOLT CTL. So if you think we can finish all of this work in time, then for this release we can do this. Otherwise, I suggest that we can do this for the next release.
I mean, like, so just like as a simple thing, maybe I'm thinking in two simple ways, but like to like add an ingress controller, you don't have to add it in your own Helm chart, but just to give the community a way to use VOLT CTL and stuff like that. This is basically Helm repo add nginx ingress, Helm install nginx ingress, and then you need one file. It's like 10 or 15 lines that defines an nginx ingress controller or an nginx ingress for for the VOLTA deployment. So that's also documented in the nginx ingress part, so we can copy it from there. But it shouldn't be more than
It is already documented. Using the
it is already there. Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't see that.
But it is almost the end of the documentation, so people uses the port forwarding way of accessing the VOLTA API. Maybe we can just remove the port forwarding and add the ingress controller parts in the beginning of the documentation, so people can try that first.
But if I look at the Helm charts now, there seems to be even like the ingress controller already in the code, right? So like if I understood that correctly, while installing VOLTA, I should be able to set etcd.ingress.enable to true and volta.ingress.enable to true, and that should give me exactly what we need here.
Yeah, probably.
Those are two arguments that we could easily pass while running the pipeline. Or am I looking at the wrong thing? Let me chat this thing. So this is the VOLTA Helm charts part, and it says like to include the ingress resource when deploying VOLTA, the following values need to be set, and then you can basically when installing infra, when installing VOLTA. So we could pass those values while installing that, and then we would have those ingress controllers, and then we don't need a workaround anymore.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Cool. Let's do that. That sounds good. Let's do that. So I'll then not do my patch, but I'll try to. I also didn't read that far. I'm sorry. So I could have maybe spotted that, but it's a bit down in the documentation. So yeah, I'll try to do that patch then, and then we can use that, and then we can get rid of the kubectl port forward thingies. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Right.
Well, simple is good. Let's see.
So maybe the last one here from Christina as well is this bandwidth guarantee. This is something where we're not sure how to continue the debugging here, because I mean the test seems to work and it seems to tell us that something else is not working. So it's basically telling us that the upstream bandwidth guarantee was not met. So this, I don't know, is either an issue or wrong expectations, or would be cool.
I'm not sure, but as far as I remember, there was some problem to measure this bandwidth value with the tools that we are using for tests. So this test, I think we were skipping these tests, these bandwidth measuring tests, even if they fail. But I'm really not sure about that.
Okay. So for us, it would be important to know if there's something to debug here, or if this is the expected behavior.
If currently the tests or this, tests, report the success, even if these tests are failing, we can think that, I mean, we can pass this test now, but if the job fails when one of these tests fails, then I think we have to worry about it.
So as said, like there is like 26 of 32 tests passing for this hardware related tests now.
Yeah.
2 of them are the ones that are related to your patch that should hopefully be fixed by merging what you proposed. And the other 4 are the ones that we see here.
They are this one. Okay.
So yeah, we would need to figure out if there is like, if we should just not expect 32 of 32 to succeed, because these 4 have always been failing, or if we can also lower expectations here, because it says something about the bandwidth guarantee that is like, so I guess something that is expected, or it might also be that the hardware is broken or too old, or the cable is broken or too old, or I actually don't know what could cause these things. But it would be good before we start replacing all the cables and then still see the same result to know if where this comes from, or if this has always been like that, or hard to tell for me, because the test looks fine, right? It's not like one of these other tests where we saw like, okay, there's a bit of brokenness in the code, or a bit of like, I don't know, miscabling or whatever. This looks like it's actually showing that for the current setup, we're testing bandwidth guarantees and they're not met.
Yeah, we have to check this. I mean,
cool.
If we have to check how we do these tests, which tools we're using, because I remember some problems about the tool we were using. I don't know if we still use the same tool, or we use any tool actually. So we have to check this. If these are failing, and we have to check them.
Okay. Are you gonna take this one?
Myself.
I don't know. Like you were like you seem to know what to look at. I mean, if anybody else wants to take it, it's just like so Christina and myself just looked at it and were like, okay, so this might be an actual failure, and like it's hard for us to judge like how can we debug this further, because the test itself looks fine, the hardware looks fine, all the other tests are succeeding. So this looks more like something on the like either the VOLTHA level or the expectation level, and it would be cool if somebody else from the community could like come in and assist us a bit with like, pushing this further. And then we would have a full green pipeline. So that would really be a cool thing. We would have like 32 of 32 tests passing for hardware. I mean, that's cool.
Okay, Serkan, do you remember if we have this bandwidth test in both in DT and Türk Telekom test, or they're only in DT test?
I don't know anything about it, Maya, actually.
Okay.
For the bandwidth test.
Okay, cool. I'll try to check it if I have time, but I'm not sure if I can spare some time this week to check this. If anyone on the call have time to look at this problem, that will be good. Great. Yeah.
Doesn't look like we have any Jenkins jobs running that are flavored as Turk Telecom test, just the DT tests. Yeah, if you do a Jenkins job search for Build Berlin Community Pod 1, GPON, blah blah blah, TT, there are none.
Yeah, this is we should have some TT tests in community pods also. This is
Me-
DT. There are two DT, at least two DT jobs, one for FTDB and one for this one T-Cont 8 gem test, and one should be for Türk Telekom job.
It could be just in under a different name too. I'm just doing a really quick search.
It's not one T8 gem, but
What do you mean on the Berlin community pod? Because I also haven't
yes.
seen those.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe I also like, because I searched through most of this stuff, and for the Berlin community pod, I was also mostly seeing this DT part. But maybe there's also some Turk Telecom running in the DT lab, and they don't
Yeah.
even know.
Definitely that should be.
Okay, I'll search for it as well. There should be something.
Okay. Oops.
Yeah, I can see build Berlin community pod on GPON TPTT VOLTHA method. It's somehow disabled or what?
There
All
have been,
jobs on the community pods are currently disabled because we can debug a bit faster this way when not like suddenly
Got
a
it.
pipeline appears and destroys all of our space.
Got it. Okay. You can see the same job, TT job, on VIP view also. There is a TT job there also. Okay.
It's on the community pod 2, right? The Zyxel one. It's
No, the Türk Telekom job that is on community pod 2 is not working correctly. We need to do some configuration, VLAN configuration for it.
Okay.
But the Türk Telekom job, which is on the pod 1, was working properly.
okay. I'll try to take a look.
I can pass the link actually if you want.
I just need to find the job and the pipeline definitions, but I can probably do that. Yeah, I see one for TT. Okay. Not sure why it doesn't show up in the, maybe that's just weird filtering in the view or something, but it's there and we should like be able to work on that. Because in this VIP view, there is only the ones for the Zyxel ones, and I don't think. Oh no, it's also here. Okay, sorry.
It's
I'm
not,
just
yeah.
blind. I'm just blind. Sorry.
yeah, the VP view is all hard coded.
Yeah.
Manual job selection. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Then I'll try to take a look at this one and then see if this is the same bandwidth errors or if it's ignored there or not run there. That was the question, right? Towards that TT job?
Yes.
Okay, and if it's not run there, then we assume that it's not worth running it and we remove it from the DT jobs as well?
I don't have answer for this question. I don't think we should remove something in the test. But if we cannot test something properly, we should remove them in the test. Instead of seeing them failing and skipping them, it's better to remove them if we cannot test them properly. But if we can test them properly and find some, if there is some bug there, etc., then we should, fix it. But I remember that that's not crystal clear, but I remember something like we couldn't test them properly, the bandwidth test. We couldn't do them properly. But I'm not crystal clear on that. So we need to check them. If this is the case, we can, clear them. If this is not the case, then, we should fix the problem.
Yeah, sounds good.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's all of the updates, unless anybody has anything else to add. And I guess with that, the floor is open if anybody would like to bring up any topics or anything we haven't covered today.
We want to quickly update people on our discussion from an hour ago of like how we're going to delete all the code.
Oh, sure. That'll put the fear into everybody. Okay, so for some background, in the CI management repository, we kind of have some release, I'll call it pseudo branching because it's not technically branching. So in order to branch tests for the releases that we've been doing, 2.8, 2.10, 2.11, blah, blah, blah. Branching has been incomplete, but within the YAML config files that define job pipelines, you can specify, what branch and what label to refer to the pipeline code as. And we've been making physical copies within master branch by creating a subdirectory named for the releases that we're performing, VOLTHA 2.8, VOLTHA 2.10, and then physically making a copy from master into these subdirectories. And the pipelines were modified to run scripts from these subdirectories. Yes, it's a little complicated as it sounds. Jan was having an idea, or one other piece, the way the pipelines have been set up, we're using DSL statements, which are it's a kind of language, not quite a programming language. It overloads some Groovy statements so that you can write pipeline definitions in terms of English or in terms of sentences rather than writing coding as programs to do them. Where am I going with this? So rather than using the DSL statements, which when you generate pipelines, and Jan, chime in if I miss anything here, a copy of the Groovy scripts and the code that we're running as part of the pipeline ends up being copied into a static image of the pipeline script. So when jobs are running, they basically have a complete copy of everything. One of the problems with doing this, and this was alluded to last week, you have to run a job through the CI management run a CI management repository job to trigger job regeneration. And if you don't trigger regeneration, you end up running jobs with stale copies of scripts. Like one case we've seen this happen is if you modify a Groovy source script or a shell script, those changes just sit in master branch in the CI management repository, and they're not actually used in the running pipeline jobs until a YAML config file is checked in and forces job regeneration. So the change Jan was proposing was to change the DSL descriptions where we were getting the static copies, just change those over so that we're using SCM checkouts from a specific branch. So what we basically do is create branches in the CI management repository, and then the generated pipeline jobs would grab their copies of the Groovy scripts and the shell scripts and everything that they need directly from the version that's checked into revision control rather than using these static copies. That's going to be good for deploying changes and all that fun stuff. We have one small problem, but in terms of what we're dealing with right now, I think this overrides any of the problems we might have. There's a chance when changes are checked into the master branch, if there's any typos that are put into them, that could end up taking some of the pipeline jobs out of commission. That's going to be a short-term vulnerability, because if we do a formal release from a CI management repository and branch and merge changes off a master into named branches like VOLTHA 2.12, VOLTHA 2.11, and have the pipeline scripts running from these branches, that's the extra piece of information of insulation we would need to prevent typos going into CI management from taking down any of the running pipelines. And if Jan has anything else you'd like to add in, feel free.
No, it was a perfect description, I guess, of what we just discussed. I think like so. Joey and I spent like an hour discussing a bit what our best options here are, and I think like going for a branching model might be a pretty good thing, because then we can reduce the blast radius a bit of what happens when we refactor or basically fix master, because all of the fixes and changes in the master branch for scripts and job definitions, also like including the stuff of like this port forwarding or whatnot, would only affect pipelines that run master, and we would not accidentally change or break anything that does not run master. So that's might give us a bit more of security when doing the refactoring part or the fixing part, and should hopefully also reduce a bit the amount of static content that we need to keep on the Jenkins part. Let's see how it goes. Just as basically just as a heads up, you should not see too much of negative effects, I hope. Let's see how it goes. We'll be merging that in the next couple of days. Yeah, if anybody wants to be added to any of the reviews, let me know. I can obviously add more email addresses there, and you can chime in your 5 cents or whatever, so that we can see who thinks what.
I do like that blast radius description. That is pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Oh, wow. Finished right on time today. Okay, I guess does anybody else have any other topics you'd like to cover or bring up before we break? I'll add a note about that on the agenda page too. Okay, well, thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Yep, bye.